he told her on their wedding night. "I might cheat, but I'll always come back to you." And instead of leaving him, she smiled, and agreed. But what happened next, no one was ready for. Ryan Woodhouse was not your typical man. At 34, he had already built a sleek advertising firm, lived in a top-floor loft in Manhattan, and drove a car so silent it made more statements than sound. He was charismatic, the kind of man who walked into a room and made people pause, not because of his looks, but because of his ease. Ryan never rushed, never fumbled. He existed in perfect timing. And yet, for all his charm and eloquence, there was something about commitment, something raw and suffocating, that unnerved him. He believed in connection, yes, in passion, in late-night conversations and shared coffees in the morning. But he did not believe in fences. He called monogamy an illusion packaged as virtue. So when he met Eliza, calm, composed, eyes that looked like they saw your truths before you even spoke them, he was torn between fascination and fear. She wasn't like the others. She didn't lean into his charm or play games. She didn't ask where he was going or why he didn't call. Instead, she listened. Really listened. And when he admitted, over sushi and bourbon on their 5th date, that he wasn't the forever one-woman man, she didn't flinch. "I'd rather have your honesty than your lies," she had said softly, and that moment echoed in his bones for days. They married within a year, in a small ceremony under sycamore trees, with handwritten vows and a jazz trio that played Eliza's favorite songs. Ryan's friends raised eyebrows. "You? Married?" they joked. But he smiled, genuinely. Because with Eliza, the pressure disappeared. She didn't bind him. She understood him, or so he thought. On their honeymoon in Santorini, watching the sun dissolve into the Aegean Sea, he brought it up again, nervous this time. "What if I mess this up?" he said. "What if I still wander?" Eliza looked at him, her hair catching the last amber light, and said, "As long as you tell me, as long as you come home, I won't stop you. But lie to me once, and we end." It sounded unreal. Surreal. Too good to be true. And it was. But Ryan took it. Took it as permission, as freedom disguised as love. In the years that followed, he tested the boundaries gently at first, a flirty exchange with a client, a long night with an ex-lover who needed closure, an impulsive weekend in Miami with a woman he met at an art gallery. Each time, he confessed. He always told Eliza. And each time, she simply listened. Sometimes she'd nod. Sometimes she'd pour herself a drink before replying. Once, she even smiled and said, "Thanks for being honest." But she never raised her voice. Never cried. Never accused. To their friends, they were the golden couple. Creative, composed, generous. They threw dinner parties that ended with laughter in the kitchen and wine-stained napkins. They took spontaneous road trips. Eliza designed a garden on their penthouse balcony, where lavender and rosemary grew wild. Ryan built her a reading nook overlooking the skyline. They celebrated anniversaries with quiet dinners and silly gifts, a mug with "Still Mine" written in Sharpie, a photo book titled "Us," even when it was hard. But under the surface, something was fraying. Not visibly. Not loudly. But slowly. Eliza had started writing again, filling journals with thoughts she never spoke aloud. Pages soaked in midnight ink and silent hurt. She would write after Ryan went to bed, sitting on the kitchen counter in her oversized sweater, pouring out the truths she couldn't say to his face. Because something inside her had shifted. At first, she believed what they had was brave. Unconventional, yes, but rooted in truth. But over time, the truth began to feel like poison. It crept into her sleep, into her smiles, into the way she paused before answering him when he'd say, "I was with someone else last night." One rainy Tuesday, Eliza came home early from a gallery exhibit. Ryan was still at work. She moved to their bedroom to change and noticed something unfamiliar under the pillow on his side. A velvet pouch. Inside it, a necklace, delicate gold, with a charm shaped like a moon. It wasn't hers. She would have remembered. And Ryan, he wasn't careless with gifts. He was calculated. This wasn't for her. It was a forgotten trace of someone else. For the first time in years, her hands trembled. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the necklace for minutes that felt like hours. Her heart didn't break, it cracked quietly, like ice under pressure. That night, she didn't mention it. She didn't ask questions. Instead, she made his favorite risotto, poured wine, laughed at his story about a marketing pitch gone wrong. She played her part perfectly, like an actress in a scene she never auditioned for. But inside, the unraveling had begun. The next few weeks were a silent storm. Ryan noticed her distance, how she'd pause before speaking, how she no longer lingered in his arms after lovemaking, how she spent more time in her garden, pruning in silence. He chalked it up to work stress. He didn't know she'd started therapy, or that she'd opened a separate bank account, or that she'd begun keeping records of everything. She never confronted him. She didn't accuse or scream. Because Eliza had decided something important. If he was going to keep crossing lines, she would draw her own. She began envisioning a life without him. A quiet home in Vermont. A studio flooded with sunlight. Mornings that didn't begin with questions about who he'd been texting. She imagined peace. Then came the night that changed everything. Ryan walked in late, after midnight. He smelled of perfume not hers. His shirt was wrinkled. She was awake, sitting on the couch with a book she hadn't read a single word of. He looked guilty, then tried to mask it with a smile. Sorry. Got caught up. She looked at him, not with anger, but something worse. Disappointment. Do you love her? She asked softly. Ryan's smile faded. He didn't answer. That silence was louder than any confession. Eliza stood, walked past him, and went to bed. The next morning, she didn't ask for an explanation. She simply left the necklace he had hidden on his pillow. Nothing else. Over the next week, Ryan tried to fix things. Flowers. Apologies. Promises. It didn't mean anything, he said. You said I could? You said you'd understand? Eliza finally spoke. I said I'd understand honesty. I never said I'd stay forever. That night she packed a suitcase. Not much, just essentials. She booked a flight to Portland, where her cousin lived. She left no dramatic goodbye. No tears. Just a text that said, "Thank you for the truth. I'm choosing mine now." Ryan came home to silence. The garden was still there. The books on the shelf untouched. But Eliza's presence was gone. And for the first time, the weight of his freedom crushed him. Because what he thought was understanding was sacrifice. What he called honesty was slow heartbreak. And the woman who had once said, "As long as you come home," had finally realized, home is not a place someone cheats and returns to. It's a place where you are chosen. Every day. Without conditions. Ryan sat alone on the edge of their king-sized bed, a familiar space that now felt unfamiliar, foreign, hollow. The necklace still lay where Eliza had placed it, soft gold catching the morning light, almost mocking in its quiet shimmer. For the first time in years, silence pressed against his ears like a scream. The house smelled different. No vanilla-scented candles burning. No kettle whistling in the kitchen. No Eliza humming softly as she watered her plants. The absence was total. Not just her body, but her essence, the softness she carried, the invisible threads she had woven through their life without asking for thanks. It was as if the soul of the home had been packed into her suitcase and flown away, leaving behind only the shell of what used to be. Ryan tried to function, tried to go to work, to smile at clients, to make witty comments in meetings, but inside, everything was unraveling. The confidence he wore like a second skin began to peel away. The charm he'd used to navigate the world now felt hollow, performative, dead. At night, he would lie in bed, unable to sleep. He thought of all the nights Eliza must have done the same, lying awake, next to him, knowing where he'd been. He thought of her hands, how they never shook when he confessed. How she'd pour herself a glass of wine and say, Thank you for telling me. And now he realized, those weren't the words of a liberated woman. They were the quiet wounds of someone trying to convince herself that love was enough to survive betrayal. The woman who had let him cheat wasn't empowered. She was enduring. And it shattered him to know that he had mistaken her grace for permission. 2 weeks after she left, he received a package. Inside was a notebook, her journal. The cover was navy blue, leather-bound, with the words "Unwritten Truths" etched in gold. Inside, every page was a version of her he had never met. Not the composed Eliza. Not the poetic dinner hostess. But the woman who wept quietly in the bathroom, who questioned her worth every time he returned from someone else's arms. The woman who felt herself shrinking with every honest confession. She had written about the first time he told her he slept with someone else, how she'd sat on the bathroom floor until sunrise, her chest tight, wondering if she was broken for not leaving. She wrote about the time she saw a photo of him at a rooftop party he never mentioned, his hand on another woman's waist, and how she smiled when he showed it to her later, pretending it didn't sting. She wrote about her dreams of Vermont, of peace, of waking up beside someone who didn't make her feel like a convenient choice. And on the last page she wrote, "He asked for honesty. I gave it. He asked for freedom. I gave it. He never asked what I needed, so I stopped needing him." Ryan cried that night. For the first time in a decade, he cried not because he was caught, not because he had lost, but because he had finally seen her. Really seen her. And he hated himself for being blind for so long. He wanted to fix it, but what could he fix, when the damage had been done slowly, subtly, like rust eating away at metal from the inside? He began calling her, texting her. No reply. He sent flowers, long emails, voice notes. Still silence. He flew to Portland once, stood outside her cousin's house with no plan, no script, only a heart full of guilt and a mouth full of apologies. But she didn't come out. Her cousin met him at the door and said kindly but firmly, "She's healing. Please don't interrupt that." So Ryan went back to Manhattan. He closed his office for a month. Went to therapy. Volunteered at a shelter for young men with behavioral addictions. And for the first time, he started journaling too. At first, it felt ridiculous. Him, the man who built ad campaigns and sealed deals over cocktails, now scribbling his feelings in a notebook like some lost teenager. But slowly, he began to understand the shadows inside him. His need for validation. His fear of being truly known. The way he'd used honesty as a shield to avoid accountability. He wrote letters to Eliza, dozens. Never sent. Just wrote them and kept them. Some angry. Some pleading. Some full of regret. But the one that mattered most said, "You were never weak for staying. I was weak for thinking you'd never leave." Months passed. Seasons changed. The rooftop garden began to wither. The lavender dried out. The rosemary turned brown. He didn't water them anymore. It didn't feel right. Not without her. Then one morning in early spring, Ryan received an invitation. A small white envelope, handwritten. It was from Eliza. She was showcasing her new art installation at a gallery in Portland. The theme, "What we carry and what we let go." At the bottom, she had written, "If you come, come only to witness, not to reclaim." Ryan flew out that weekend. The gallery was small, bright, quiet. Her work lined the walls, large canvas pieces filled with layers of texture, paint, paper, thread. Each piece carried fragments of stories, torn letters, stitched words, faded photos. But the final piece was what stopped him cold. A large installation titled, "The Space Between Promises." At the center was a woman's silhouette made of broken glass, surrounded by floating gold threads. It was beautiful. And painful. And true. Eliza stood nearby, speaking with guests. She looked different. Not dramatically. Just freer. There was a lightness in her shoulders, a warmth in her eyes that had been missing for years. When she finally saw Ryan, they stood across from each other for a long moment. Then she smiled. Not bitter. Not regretful. Just kind. He walked over and said, "It's beautiful." She nodded. "Thank you for coming." And in that moment he knew. There was no going back. No dramatic reunion. No final plea. This was it. Not an ending. Not a punishment. But the peace that comes when two people finally understand they're not meant to heal inside the same storm. Ryan walked out of the gallery with a strange calm in his chest. He didn't win her back. But he saw her fly. And somehow, that was enough. Because in the end, love is not always about possession. Sometimes it's about the courage to watch someone become whole without you. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to The Other Side Story. Where untold emotions and hidden truths come to life, your story starts here.